On the subject, though, the last thing I'll ask you about, less is indeed more. And the biggest thing that came out of Monday's Raw was not anything that happened in the ring. It was not a pay-per-view announcement. It was a small line they threw in there that they later made official on Twitter soon after. That Raw, starting October 7th, is returning to the 2-hour format only for the remainder of the run on USA Network. But listen, dude, I don't give a fuck. 2 months, 3 months, whatever it's going to be is better than nothing. This would mark the first ever string, or really just first ever 2-hour show in general for WWE Raw since 2012, the week before Raw 1000. I don't think there has been a single show since then that has been under 3 hours. It's either been 3 hours or more. And they're going back to 2 hours, albeit briefly, because I think that was when their original deal with USA was supposed to expire. And they're like, listen, we'll keep you until the Netflix thing goes into effect in January. But by doing that, we're going to make it 2 hours. I don't know what fucking programming they're putting in the third hour where Raw would be. That would get much higher ratings than Raw. I don't know if it's Grizzly Knows Best. I know he got arrested. I don't know. But
hey!
Fuck that show. Fuck him. Fuck that show. It's trash. They ruined my precious USA Network. But that being said, they're going back to 2 hours. I see this. We'll talk about the pros and cons in a second. But personally, I see this as nothing but a massive positive.
I mean, I see it as a positive. I saw a lot of weeping on Twitter. I don't call it X, so it's Twitter still, people.
It is Twitter, yeah.
But I saw a ton of people bitching about it, and I was just like, they had, like, somewhat valid points, or, like, a valid thought, I guess. But at the end of the day, it's like, maybe we'll have less drivel and, like, these random segments that don't really mean much. If they have 2 hours, like, they can actually kind of, like, compact and put good shit. Like, instead of, like, putting 3 hours worth of TV, I think it'd be easier putting 2 hours of TV on, because you're not, like, trying to, like, stretch things out and, like, it's not as I feel like boring, I guess is the best way to say it. I think it's a good thing. I mean, people like, oh, what about the women's division? Oh, like, we're not going to have we barely get as much as we do now. Like,
you figure it out.
Figure it out.
Yeah.
They'll figure it out.
You have to figure it out. Listen, SmackDown is 2 hours, and SmackDown is not a great show every single week, but it's at least more bearable because it's only 2 hours. I mean, Raw, when it was only 2 hours before they went to 3 hours, was not that much better than when Raw went to 3 hours, because the product was shit regardless back in 2012, and 2011 had its moments, but largely, the last couple of years before Raw went 3 hours, it really wasn't a great show anyway, but going 3 hours, again, I mean, you're a sports guy, you watch football games, but I think anyone can attest to the fact that watching anything, whether it's sports, a movie, wrestling, whatever, any television show, is probably a whole lot easier for 2 hours than it is for 3, and that's just the attention span of people nowadays. People tune out. Someone had asked me, or not asked, but had said to me, I'm surprised that it's 8 to 10 and not 9 to 11, which is what Raw was back in the day. I think it makes more sense, actually, personally, to have it be 8 to 10, just because, that's what people have known it to be for the last 12 years. And if it starts at 9, then people turn on at 8. They may not come back at 9. At least they're watching at 8. They could turn it off at 10. Which is what it's going to be. So I think that just makes more sense. But on that same note, though, it is honestly scary, and this is life because we're getting older, but it is honestly scary to think there is a whole audience of people, because you mentioned people, not the vast majority, but there were a fair amount of people on Twitter that only know Raw for being 3 hours, that have watched for the past 5 years or 10 years. If you've been a wrestling fan for 10 years, you have not seen in live, I didn't live through the Attitude Era, so I get this to a certain extent. But people have never seen Raw as a 2-hour show. So they might just think less is worse, and this might be a worse show. That's kind of a scary thought, to think that they've never lived through a 2-hour Raw, and that's about to be a reality in about a month.
No, yeah, I think, honestly, like you said, keep it 10 to 11, please. Because I was the fan when it was 9 to 11 on TNN, and it was painful. I'd watch till 10 and then go to bed and just tape the rest. 11 o'clock's fucking late. I'm even now, the chance I see 11 o'clock are very slim to none nowadays, even with the 3 hours. But,
yeah.
Like you said, I think 2 hours is better. Not even attention span, but like you said, after 3 hours, like I said, movies, even sporting events, it does, like, get tiresome at some point. Like, you're either watching a ton of commercials or you're just like, geez, it's just taking forever. With live sports, it's a little different, especially with how, like, everything is on social media now. Like, if you're watching a football game, you kind of have to watch it live because there's so many spoils or so many things are going on. So, I try my best to tape and kind of breeze through commercials. I fucking hate commercials, but, it is what it is at this point. But like you said, with Raw especially, 2 hours is better than 3.
I know you already touched upon this, but I think the concerns of, I said potential cons earlier, of less TV time for the women, or really just in general for the entire roster, because they do have a big roster for Raw, more so than SmackDown, because they knew it was a 3-hour show. Now, maybe not, we may not be seeing Cruz del Toro and Joaquin Wilde in matches on Raw every single week, which we don't really know anyway. So it might be worse off for people like Alpha Academy, and the matches might not go quite as long as they've been going. Like, we get longer matches on Raw. That's just a fact, because it's a 3-hour show, so they have more time to kill. The commercials don't really matter, because we're still getting commercials. It's just less commercials, because you have, an hour less, so that doesn't really change. It's not like we're getting more commercials. It's less commercials. But the timing thing, I feel like you said, I feel like if you can put together a strong, tight 2-hour show, would be better than even some of the best Raws in 2024 are still boring to a certain extent, because you still have to fill some of those 3 hours with boring, unnecessary shit. Like even on Monday's Raw, which I thought overall was a good show, a match such as Finn Balor and Rey Mysterio, which was a fine match, didn't really serve much of a purpose. I mean, they had a non-finish. They wanted to put more heat on Finn, but he was already on the show earlier in the night. Like, when you eliminate that 3rd hour, people don't have to appear in as many segments. They don't have to pull double duty as much. I just don't really see the overwhelming negatives to this, honestly, because again, like you said, for anyone complaining all these people are going to get less time, on SmackDown, they already have that issue, or quote-unquote issue of 2 hours, so you just got to figure it out.
Yeah, no, I think you just need to take the list of your roster, fucking put guys, girls on each side, rank them, and then from there, you look at the time and plan out your show. I mean, I think if anything with the 2 hours, maybe you can kind of like plan the shows better, like weekly, just because like you can maybe do like a couple VTRs or backstage segments to set up things next week. So it's like we might get a quick person on the show just for a little bit, but then next week, they have a match coming up or something like that. I feel like I said, people are worried about the women's division. I mean, realistically, outside of Liv in Rhea right now in Raw, there really isn't a ton that's really interesting going on anyways. Like the whole Shayna group, like, no thank you. They I will say that's probably Raw's biggest Achilles heel right now. They really don't have like any single women. I mean, that's really, like, who would even contend at this point? Like, I like Lyra, but they really haven't done a ton with her lately.
No.
I mean,
Natalia's
that's
back.
kind of, I mean, they got Damage Control, but they're kind of doing, or they were in like the tag team scene. So I guess we'll see, but I think it's a challenge for even on SmackDown. Like, they have a ton of women. It's not like they're doing a ton with them, but I mean, you just got to like plan it out and see what you can do from there. So, I mean, I'm happy with 2 hours. I mean, who knows what's going to happen when they go to Netflix? I mean, are they going back to 3? They're going to stay with 2? I guess we'll see. But I think for the end of the year, going just to 2 hours, it's a change I'm willing to take.
I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said, like, specifically with the women's stuff. It's not that I want to see less women's stuff, but more time does not always equate to quality time. And this goes for anyone on the roster, not just the women. But just because some of the women, specifically, Pure Fusion Collective, get television time every single week, which is better than no TV time, but they're just not over. Like, what they're doing with said time, and I'm not talking about Sonya herself or Shayna or Zoe or whatever. It's not their fault necessarily, but they're on the shows a lot. They're on the shows every single week, and consistency is key. I will preach to that. But, like, what they do with this time, what WWE has them do at the time, I should specifically say, is not memorable. No one cares. I mean, if you were to take away those matches and segments from these shows, the show would be no better or worse off. If anything, it would be better off. I mean, it's certainly not worse off. But just because you have 5 women's matches on the show doesn't mean more, doesn't always mean better. It's the age-old expression, quality over quantity. And that goes with the men too. But I'm just using the women specifically as an example, because Pure Fusion Collective's on the show every single week, and no one gives a fuck. They're not doing anything entertaining. I can remember a time where 4 years ago at this point, where they were having Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville feud. And that was on SmackDown. That was not a 3-hour show. That was a 2-hour show. They had one of the best women's programs in the past 10 years up to that point, and that was on a 2-hour show with limited segments. On Raw, they're just being put in matches that no one gives a fuck about. I mean, she gets the occasional mic time and gets heat for it. Largely, no one cares. So I think that is something, like you said earlier multiple times, I think it's it will challenge them, honestly. With 3 hours, you can get lazy and get everyone on the show, but that doesn't mean they're going to get over through that. With 2 hours, you are challenged to put the more meaningful stuff on the show and make the most of the time that you have. And they're already doing that with SmackDown, so I don't understand why they can't do that with Raw, too.
No, I agree. I think you nailed it perfectly, honestly. I just think people think, oh, you got to get them on the show, but just because they're on the show doesn't mean they're doing good things. Like you said, consistency is nice. Like, the more you see them out there, like maybe they'll connect with the audience.
Yes.
But like you said, the whole pure fusion collection, like it's just not good. They're not feuding with anyone that's really interesting. I like Damage Control, but that doesn't make me like hate this group. Like, if anything, I just like get off my TV. I feel like I like Sonya. I think with Shayna and Zoe specific, I feel like they've kind of, especially Shayna, it's like been there, done that. I just kind of overseeing them on TV, but at least they're trying. But like, you need a pivot. It's just like the women's championships, the tag team championships. Like, when are you going to finally pivot and realize like you've kind of tried everything in the toolbox? Like, it's just time to move on. Like, I get like not everything works, but like, just because they're on TV, it's not. I don't think that group's ever going to get over at this point. I think it's kind of proven. So, like, you kind of got to pivot and go in a different direction, I think.
Yeah, you would think by now they would have learned that. I mean, it's been a couple months, and they got to do something different, whether it's just juicier storylines or more meaningful storylines. I don't know what it is. Just being put in matches for the sake of matches, which we see in AEW, and even those people are sometimes more over than a lot of the people in WWE, depending on who we're talking about. Does not really equate to, like I see Commander on the show every week in AEW. Do I give a fuck about him? No. I don't give a shit about Commander. Pure Fusion Collective is the same thing, where they're on the show every single week. I don't really give a shit about the group. They're not really doing anything. They're losing, they win, they lose. It's impossible to care. But the last question I'll pose to you as far as that goes, when they go back to 2 hours on October 7th for a 3-month period, because the first Raw on Netflix is January 6th, so almost exactly 3 months, do you think there's a possibility, and I don't really think it's going to happen personally, if they go back to 2 hours and they see that the grass is indeed greener on the other side, that they can make this work, it makes for a better show, people are enjoying it, blah, 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 that they might just keep it 2 hours on Netflix, or more realistically, Netflix is like, listen, we are paying for a 3-hour block of content, we're keeping 3 hours. Regardless of what you do up to this point, we don't give a fuck. But when you come here on January 6th, we are making it 3 hours again. I feel like that's more likely, but you can't rule out the possibility that the WWE might say, hey, 2 hours is better. Fans are receiving it better. Maybe they won't. I don't know. I'm just saying they could.
I think it just really depends on what's, like you said. It's not like a network that you're like, hey, we're taking these 3 blocks of like Netflix doesn't really have live TV or like. So it's a little bit different, I think. Like you said, like it's not like they're on a normal network. It's like, hey, we're taking this 3-hour block. We have advertisement and all that jazz, like paying the network, da-da-da-da. Like it's a streaming platform, so it's a little bit different. I hope that if they think the 2 hours is better and it feels like the show is just a more quality show than quantity, I think hopefully that's where they go. But like you said, I think a lot of people think, oh, you got to get everyone on the show, but that doesn't make the show better. Like you nailed you nailed the nail on the head. Like, yeah, it's nice to see like Sony and all them, like Alpha Academy, great for them. I'm glad they're on the show making a living, but like, does it make the show any better? No. The show would, like you said, probably be better if they weren't on it, because sometimes it's just random matches that I just don't care about.
Yeah, that's what they need to make, be more mindful of starting in October with the 2-hour shows and kind of assess, all right, what's working here, what's not. And I'm not saying they just have to make the most of the time. Like, it's people might see that they go from 3 to 2 hours and think, oh, well, then this Pure Fusion Collective match is going to go from 10 minutes to 5 minutes, and we're going to be back in the diva days of 90-second women's matches, which we kind of get sometimes anyway, specifically on SmackDown. I'm not saying that. You can give them longer matches, or the men longer matches, or whatever, but it's how you map out the time. It just makes it more challenging. When you have a big roster, specifically on Raw, you got to make it work. If you have to relegate some people to main event, well, then so be it. And Alpha Academy, at least to their credit, are over. Pure Fusion Collective, we've been picking on them specifically, so I feel bad.
Because they're on TV every week and it's not getting any better.
But it's true. You know what? It's just not over. It's just not clicking. You're right. It's just not working. So these are the things they have to sit down and assess what's working, what's not. And SmackDown obviously can be improved as well. That's not changing. I know there was a rumor this upcoming show on Friday, oh, it's a 3-hour show. No, it was a typo. USA is not making it, at least not imminently, hopefully ever, a 3-hour show. That would be fucking terrible. We do not need more, we need less. And I'm not saying making it an hour, but 2 hours each makes perfect sense. Even back to the AEW thing, all these hours of television, 4 hours here, 3 hours there, Ring of Honor, like, a lot of those hours don't mean anything. That's WWE. In like 2019 when they had 205 Live and they had NXT UK and all these other shows, and no one cared about most of it because it wasn't good content. Like, if you make the shows matter, then less can be more, and you can make the most of the time that you're given, I think, is our main point here. So we'll see on October 7th. I'm looking forward to Raw being back to 2 hours. It's going to be over at 10. Maybe go to bed nice and a little bit earlier than usual. That would be nice to see. We'll see. But I'm looking forward to that on October 7th.